Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families one day at a time. Thank you for joining us. 1 week has been a long time. It's Saturday, we're getting ready for church tomorrow, we're reflecting on our week, and perhaps we're asking a question for those of us who have kids. Where did I go wrong? Tonight, we're going to talk about how parents parent, and I just want you to think back a bit, circa your teenage years. Friday night, it's time to go hang out, and your parents say, you can't go. You're a Christian, no partying. No lines after 9 o'clock, no boyfriends for the girls. And then you have this thought as a teenager, I hate my parents. Okay, circa around now, you're the adult telling your children, no boys, no parties, no lines after 9 o'clock, get in that house before I turn that key. And they're the ones saying, I hate my parents. Your random thought now becomes, oh my gosh, I sound like my mother. Tonight, we're going to talk about how parents parent. We have two very able guests to speak with us this evening. I am excited. They're dynamic, they're diverse in their experiences, and hopefully we will have a really open and honest conversation this evening. After all, this is Real Talk. And so I want to introduce to you Miss Laurel Springer, whose specialty is youth justice, community safety, and justice sector reform. And we also have Mrs. Carrie-Ann Hurley, who's a youth development officer and a social worker at the Barbados Family Planning. Ladies, good evening and welcome. I'm going to ask you to just open your mics and say hello to everyone before we jump right into this very exciting topic this evening.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Dr. Sutherland, for that great, warm welcome, and great pleasure to be here among good company again. So really looking forward to the discussion and all that will come out of this very interesting conversation. You kind of hit the nail on the head in regards to my background. What I will say at this moment is that most of my work right now is actually focused within the school system. That gives me a really great opportunity to come really directly in contact with parents and being able to hear, understand, and support them through lots of the challenges that they may experience. So I am happy to lend a voice to the conversation this evening.
Yes, good evening. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome. As you all heard, my name is Carrie-Ann Hurley. I may be better known in some circles as Sira, because in addition to being a social worker, I've been in the field of social work for almost 20 years now. I know I don't look it, but I have been working specifically with young people. That's my niche area, focusing on working with at-risk youth, in particular, support for young girls and adolescents. And I have been serving as the social worker at the Barbados Family Planning here in Barbados for just about almost all of those 20 years. I have a passion for working with parents. I run a program for young mothers, and I'm really passionate about supporting young parents through their journey of parenting, because it can be so tough. They're dealing with their own issues as young people. And then on top of that, they have this large responsibility of taking care of another life that has been entrusted into their hands, or lives for that matter, because some of them have multiple children. And it can be a really challenging time. So for me, my background as a social worker is one, I think, that allows me to engage with a range of different types of persons from different backgrounds, coming with many different issues. And then as an artist, being out there and being able to use my art and my creativity to share information through my music about life, drawing on the life experiences, not just of myself, but of the clients that I work with. And then becoming a mother myself, that has also kind of added to the dynamic, because I would have been running this program for young mothers and working with young mothers before I became a mother myself. But I guess, you know how God places it upon our hearts to nurture others. And I think as a social worker, we are innately nurturers, because you don't go into social work for the money. You go into it for the people. It's not, that great of a paying job, but you definitely get a really wonderful reward when you're able to help people be empowered and to live and to thrive. And so now becoming a mother myself, I think there's some new nuggets of wisdom and understanding that God is downloading in my spirit and in my life as a result of my experiences thus far. So I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and to talk about all the nuances of parenting that we will discuss tonight.
Well, that is so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie Ann. So, I don't want to do a lot of talking tonight. I want to hear from you all. We encourage the participants to use the function of the chat and Zoom. For those of you who are online, we're watching, see if you have questions as well. This is our opportunity. We have two experts. So we're going to jump right in. And I'm thinking, you're new parents, as you said, Carrie Ann, and, before you become parents, we usually cast those judging looks at parents who can't get their children to sit still, or their children at 9 o'clock and your child is still up. Like, what is this? They're drinking milk that's not, 2% or not almond. So I want to start with that. Like, how do we really parent as parents? Like, all of a sudden you have this responsibility for this life form that seems to be the best thing, and then sometimes the worst thing ever when they're babies, and then they become these cute little toddlers who sometimes you say they're like angels, but then they're the complete opposite when they get to the terrible twos. Then they morph into these adolescents that you think, yes, great person in society, and then they become these teenagers that you think, God, how did you think my back was so broad to bear this cross? And so you go through we meander through these valleys and these hills of parenting, and then we see what is happening in society, and we wonder, how are parents parenting? So my first question to you guys is, really, how do we do this? If you could think of one thing that you would say to parents from a social work perspective, in terms of going into this job, right? This full-time job, what would you say to them, male or female? One nugget that you would say to them. Do we develop a goal? What our fundamental goals should look like? Should we have a top 10 list of do's and don'ts? Just what is one key thing you would say if you were having coffee with someone and you wanted to give them a nugget? Laurel, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm thinking of a statement that every parent says, and I always love to give the disclaimer that I am not a biological parent myself, but it seems as if, as I say to persons, by nature of my career, I have several children that I have parented in different capacities, in different settings for the past however many years. If there's one thing I would say, and I know parents say there's no manual, I always say that for us, when we are professionally trying to upgrade, we do our degree, we do our courses, we try to get as much information and we do our research so that we can be the best lawyer, the best plumber, the best interior decorator. If you're a mechanic, you're reading up and trying to find out, what are the new trends and the new engines, and you're trying to do everything you can to know as much as possible about this career or this hobby or this interest that you are passionate about. Likewise, when it comes to parenting, there may not be an official manual, but I would encourage all parents to do as much learning as possible. And it doesn't have to be academic learning, that has its place, but having conversations with parents, having conversations with your own parents, having conversations with persons about the reality of the role that you are expected to be in if you are approaching being a new parent, if it's something that you're considering. My advice would be, is to try to get to know as much as you can. That withstanding, though, when you get to be a parent, it might be a totally different experience, but at least you have a framework to work with. At least you have something that you can remember. Well, I remember that they said that at this age, this might start happening, or I need to look for this when this happening. So I think that my kind of summary conclusion to that would also be to develop a community, a village that can support you in your journey. We often say the adage that it takes a village to raise a child, and maybe in the course of the discussion, we'll talk about how that village looks so different today and what the impact of that has been. But I would really encourage parents to find your tribe, find your village, find persons who can support you along the journey, because as you rightly said, what support you may need at 2 months old may look different when the child is 2 years old, may look different when they're 12 years old. So just find yourself a village so that you don't feel alone in the journey.
Yeah, I want to support what Laurel said and build upon that. And again, for me, you're gonna find out throughout the course of our conversation tonight. I draw a lot on my life experiences, and this is even before I became a parent. Like, that's just the way that God has led me in the way I connect and communicate with people. Because I do believe that everything I go through, there's a greater purpose beyond me for it, and if I can tap into it and use it to help other people, then that so be it. But I truly agree with Laura when she spoke about the same approach that we take to other things in our lives when it comes to academics or what's not, where if we're interested in something, we do a lot of research. We dive deep into reading books and asking questions and Googling and, gathering information to give us a wealth of knowledge that we can make informed decisions from. And the same principle is applicable to parenting. Part of that research is going to be praying and asking God for guidance. And part of that research is also going to be actually going to books and going to resources that are available that can give tips and guidelines and can give some insight into how to parent depending on the particular stage that you're at or the particular thing that you are trying to get information for. So for instance, when my husband and I, when I was pregnant with our daughter, we did a lot of reading before she even was born about things like, we started to think about, okay, what are the things that are important for us? We looked at our lifestyle. We looked at, the way we were living, how busy we were, what did we think we wanted to have established to ensure that where possible, the transition of having this new, beautiful little human being who is going to be very selfish, not intentionally, but that's just the nature of a child, and who is going to require all of our time and attention. How can we now adjust to ensure that we are still keeping the things that we deem to be priorities, within reason, and also ensuring that she is well taken care of and provided for. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure was in place from very early was something like a structure, a bedtime structure. Okay, is she? I smile when you give your intro, Dr. Sutherland, about it's 9 o'clock and you want to go out, but your parents are saying, no, you can't leave home. You need to be in this house by 8:30, that type of thing. From now, my daughter is 2, but she already has a bedtime, like we set structure from the day she was born. Or should I say from the day she came home, because in the hospital, it's a little different. But from the time she came home, we had determined beforehand that there was a particular structure we wanted to have in place. So by a certain time, we started to wind down for the night. So what did that entail? In our reading and our research, we found that there were certain things that people suggested were good things to do to help prepare for nighttime for babies. So things like having a red light in the room and sleeping with a red light on. which is supposed to help with melatonin and help babies settle more. And we were like, oh, that sounds cool. We'll try that. Things like having white noise. So we were like, yeah, okay, we'll invest in a white noise, in some kind of a white noise machine or something that we can have white noise playing. Now, of course, all of this we were thinking about before she even came. So we were reading books, we were, asking questions, gathering information, finding out what we thought worked for us, what did we like, what did we not like. Some things that were suggested, we were like, nah, that's not for us. That's not gonna work. We're not interested in that. And then there are other things that piqued our interest and we said, okay, interesting, something we can consider. And then when she did come, we implemented it. We tried it. That's the next phase. Trying. So you gather your information, you do your research, but then there's a trial and error part of this process. We had no idea that she would have liked the red light or the white noise, or she would have disliked it. We didn't know if it would have worked for us collectively, because I had never slept in a red light before. My husband never did. So we didn't even know if for us it was going to work generally, because we obviously needed to be well rested to be able to provide for her, right? So when she came, we tried it. We did find that the red light works well. We all slept better. We found having the sound machine was a bonus. And to this day, she's now 2 and almost, she turned 2 in February. To this day, still sleeps with a red light, still has that sound machine on. To the point when she wakes up on mornings now and it's time to get ready, she will say, Mom, turn off the sound machine. Because she knows this is part of bedtime. That signals it's time for bed. So setting structure. And for us as parents, it was about just first having conversations with each other about what are the things that we wanted, what are the things we wanted to have or to consider putting in place to make our home as comfortable as possible and to make our jobs as parents a little bit easier. And having those conversations together helps us to see where both of us were at. And then that helps us to see what the things we needed to explore. And then once we agreed on the things that we wanted to implement, we tried them. And then the other thing that was really important in this process was not comparing ourselves or the decisions that we made or the things that worked for us with other parents. So I agree with Laurel. It is important to have a community. It is important to have a tribe of persons that you can reach out to, you can ask questions, you can bounce. I'm in so many parent groups now on WhatsApp. I am like all of my friends who've had children, like, I have all these people, my mom, my aunt, like all these people that have really good information and insight that they can share. But it's so critical that in the gathering of that information, that if I did try something and it didn't work for us, that I didn't start to compare our situation or our reality with other people. Because my child is unique. She is her own person, right? And let me tell you, she's her own person. She has a very strong personality, right? We are our own unique tribe as well. And we have our own way of living and existing. And so it was important that if I realized that there was something that I may have really wanted to do because I thought, oh, that sounded real good. That sounded like it's a good idea and a good suggestion. And I see other people trying it and it's working well for them, but I try it and it's not working for me. It's really important not to compare, because we have to remember that there's so many other nuances that we need to bear in mind that will make things either work or not work for your particular situation. So it's really about, oh, and another point, Jonathan McReynolds has a song that says comparison kills. That's a real thing, even in parenting. There's so many parents who start to then almost like cry down the things that they are actually doing well and the areas where they are actually thriving, because they're comparing themselves with other people and feeling like they're not making the mark, they're not meeting that standard that's not even theirs to meet, right? And then they start to look at themselves through this very negative, almost like a failure type lens, when really and truly you are doing so well for your situation, for your child, for your family unit. But because you're looking at other people, whether that is things that they're showing on social media, and we know how on social media it's all about the highlight reels. You only seeing like the good, the pretty, the bling bling side of life. You're not seeing the true. I mean, only in recent times people are a little bit more vulnerable now, and they're kind of more willing to show the harder, more real parts of life. But for the most part, it's filters, it's all that glistening and gold, right? And so we are trying to compare ourselves with standards that are not even real, that are not even fully attainable. So I think for parents, those are my two main points that I wanted to extend off of what Laurel said. Don't compare yourself, and definitely do your research and trial and error. See what works for you, see what doesn't work for you. Eat the bones, eat the chicken, eat the meat, and spit out the bones.
I love it. I love it. And you know, what I also love is that, you know, you're coming from your genuine experience as a new parent. And Laurel, I like that you explain that you may not be a biological parent, but your experience in social work, your experience in youth gives so much weight to what you bring to this conversation that I feel like I should even say, I don't even feel like you need to justify not having biological parents. I feel like, you know, we look at your professional life, we look at what you've done, and there's no need to justify it to us, at least. So I feel like
Thank you, appreciate
bring
that.
you there and say, you are here because we have a lot to learn from you. But I want to jump to this question then, because I'm hearing you, Carrie-Ann, when you talk about lifestyle and what did you want to have established before your child came home, and you know, you wanted to nurture, but you still wanted to prioritize yourselves. And so my question to both of y'all is, should parents set goals for themselves going into parenting? We're going to talk about parents who are not having kids, but for those of us who already have kids, we're getting there. But for parents going in, and even for parents who probably have young children and they hadn't thought about this before, you know, can they make that intervention now? If they should set goals, what kind of goals should parents set for themselves as they enter into this new stage of life? We always talk about the child, but what things in terms of maybe awareness or self-care, how you want to prioritize, should we be thinking about as parents? Laurel, I'll come back to you first.
Sure. Well, I definitely answer that question right off the bat. Absolutely, yes. Parents should develop goals for themselves. It gives you focus, it gives you direction, and it also provides the opportunity for reflection that you can begin to envision what you would like your journey as a parent to look like. We know that, you know, things happen and it may not look the exact way that you've envisioned, but at least if you have a vision in mind, it gives you something to focus on. I've identified at least 4 things that I would say, it's not by any means an exhaustive list, but if I were to sum up, what would be some goals that parents can develop for themselves for raising their children? I'll say 1, for them to be aware and educated. So I kind of covered that already in my first kind of response in terms of doing all the research, talking to persons. You have the academic and professional input, but you also have anecdotal information. You have your grandmother's remedies. You have a collaboration of conversations with a range of different people. That is important. So be aware, and not only be aware of those things, but be aware of what is happening in your child's life. That leads me to my second point, be present. So making a goal to be present. This hustle culture, this always busy culture, this always on the go culture, I am seeing the impact of that with our children. And I understand the importance of provision. I understand that you have to work, you have to take care of your family, bills need to be paid. I'm not suggesting that you don't focus on things that bring in income, but the old saying of, you don't got nothing to worry about, I just put a roof over your head, I just put food on the table, like, and that is what your goal as a parent is, and only we have to be able to move past that. So my other thing would be to encourage persons to set a goal to be present, and not present as in physically present, but also to be emotionally present. You have to be there. You have to be emotionally connected, because yes, you could be in a house and your children could be around you, but you could be miles away, thinking about a deadline that you need to meet, thinking about something else, some other issue. So being present emotionally and being in the moment is another thing that I would say should be a goal of parents. Thirdly, being a positive role model. It's not about do as I say, not what I do. Children from a very young age are sponges. They see what you do, they hear what you say, they pick up your mannerisms. So being really, really intentional about what you portray to your child, because best believe they are going to be mini yous, whether in a good way or a not so good way. And finally, be available. So making a goal to be available. I mentioned about your presence and being emotionally there, but showing up for your child, going to the parent teachers meetings, going to parent seminars, going to play dates, not just dropping off the child, being involved and showing up for their hobbies and their performances. Those things make a big difference. So if I could just sum up 4 general goals that I say that parents at any age and stage of their child's life should work on or try to attain: be aware and educated, be present, be a positive role model, and be available. And I pause to use Pastor Griffith's phrase, which I absolutely love. He has full copyright to it. I give way to you, Carrie.
Oh man, she did it before me. I wanted to use that phrase.
I love it. I love it.
Oh my goodness. I think those were 4 very really great goals that Laurel just shared. For parents to really take to heart. Because I think we can almost take it for granted that it is important to set goals for ourselves in this journey. Now, we know parenting, there's the nature nurture, component that comes into parenting. And I think we also take it for granted that every parent or every person who becomes a parent just knows how to parent, and that they just know how to balance life, how to just all of a sudden keep all the balls in the air and like do it swimmingly well, and that things just keep going. But it is important that in the same way how we set goals for ourselves academically and professionally, that we also think about the ways that we want to grow, that we want to advance, that we want to thrive as a parent. And not only setting goals that center on our children. So again, building upon what Laurel just shared, we also need to set goals for ourselves as parents. Thinking about what are the things that we still want to accomplish, the things that still make us whole, and that still allow us to be well-rounded. And I apologize for that little voice in the background. She's coming to tell me that she hurt her foot. I'm sorry, guys, but this is part of the parenting process. Say hello. Yes, okay. So also making sure that you pay attention to the things that are important to you. So for me, coming into parenting, as you heard, I'm an artist. I'm a social worker. There's a lot of stuff that I do. And I still had to make sure that I thought of what goals I needed to set, or how I needed to set goals around things like my artistry, how I needed to set goals around even what I want to do within the scope of social work, right? So I thought about how long or what might it look like? How might things change for me? As now a parent and still having to go into the studio and record music, so having to write, still wanting to be able to travel, to go on tours, to do different things. And how do I need to set those goals? So did I need to give myself time? Did I need to say, okay, well, I'm going to take a couple of months off? Am I going to, like, the same way how when professionally you get time off to like take care of yourself? I had to think about that even as it relates to things like my music, my artistry, and because that's important for me, because that is part and parcel of who God has made me to be. I'm not just a mother. I'm not just a social worker. All of these things work together. And so I had to figure out how I needed to set goals and prioritize things around those areas. Okay? Yes. Yes, you're writing my name. Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to say that parents really also need to focus on, or not just focus, but also pay attention to setting goals around things that matter to them. Because Laurel, I think it was Laurel, spoke briefly about the concept of self-care. And to be a good parent, to be a parent who is present emotionally and physically, to be a parent who is available emotionally and physically, it means that you have to be prioritizing things that are important to you, not at the expense of your child, but for their benefit. Because when you are able to take care of yourself, and you do feel like, when I am able to get to go in the studio and to record and to write music, I feel energized, I feel fulfilled, I feel like I have more that I can now give to her, because I'm also nurturing that part of who I am that God also created. I'm not neglecting that part of me and causing that part to suffer and to die. So, that would be my encouragement to parents as it relates to thinking of yourself holistically, not just through the eyes of your role as a parent, but all of who you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like we could talk about this for like 5 hours, but we'll see where we get to at 8:50. So I'm hearing, and based on what we've discussed previously, is that parenting can drain you at every stage of a child's life, right? So in early life, they totally dependent on you. Then they learn to tie their shoes, but you have to help them with schoolwork. Then they can do schoolwork on their own, but then you become social worker and counselor. And you're saying in the midst of all of this, like there is no pause to parenting, but you have to find this space where you can just refill your cup so that you could give them more. And that being, life or being present as a parent is not one-dimensional, but there's so many other means to it. So I want to go into the whole idea of, sometimes we go to autopilot as we parent. And so, the stress of parenting goes back to, I look at your daughter, coming into the picture, and some parents might start having palpitations, like, why is the child on the program? And others are like, oh my God, it's so cute. Hey, how are you? Let's blow kisses, right? So sometimes we go on autopilot where we tell children, don't do this, don't do that, do this way. And then we kind of stifle their creativity. So my question to you ladies next is, where does that self-awareness about our own lifestyle as a child or growing up, or how our parents parented us, impact, influence, affect, change the way that we parent our children? And any one of you can jump in.
I guess I'll jump in here and say that in a lot of times, parents parent how they were parented. And it is really then the responsibility of an individual, if they have made the decision that they want to be a parent, is to be able to examine their own experience as a child, examine their own experience in terms of what the interaction between them and their parent looked like. Was it healthy? Was it unhealthy? Was it toxic? Are there traumas that were attached to your childhood? All of those are things that really need to be addressed if you are making the decision to be a parent. Because the unfortunate thing that will happen, and we talk a lot about cycles and generational curses, if we are not intentional in taking the time to be aware of whether or not our childhood and the unresolved issues in our childhood are not dealt with, we run the risk of actually continuing these cycles. And we run the risk of doing the same thing that our parents would have done, especially if it were harmful in any way. We need to be able to identify these things ahead of time and be active and intentional in addressing these issues. Because you could have an experience and two things could happen. You could say, because this happened, I will make it my best effort not to repeat the cycle with my child. Or if there's lack of self-awareness and if there's no work to address that trauma, what could happen is that you continue that cycle. So I would say that it is really, really important for parents to be able to do this awareness before they actually have a child. If you're married and you're having discussions with your partner, and I'm assuming that these discussions happen before you actually get married. So in the whole counseling process, individual counseling, couples counseling, wherever it is, you need to be able to identify what your childhood, what the impacts of maybe childhood trauma that is unresolved. You need to be able to address those before you actually start the parenting journey. If not, you're going to continue that and you may end up causing more harm to your child, because not only then will you be dealing with your trauma, but your trauma then ends up, as they say, hurt people. So then now you have to not only deal with your trauma, but then you'll have to deal with the manifestation of that trauma through your child. So I would always advise parents before and even during your parenting journey, because it doesn't end there. At every point of the journey, whenever you are aware that you're being triggered by something or you're struggling with something and it is taking you back to really dark places, or you're kind of wondering, how did I get there? So at every point of the journey, it isn't only before, but even during, you need to give space for self-awareness and you need to give space for healing.
I absolutely agree. And to add to, I'm doing a lot of adding tonight because Laurel is spot on. So I don't need to rehash what she just said. What I want to do though is add the other dimension of it, because we do think oftentimes of the trauma from the negative perspective, right? So you grew up in a household where there may have been abuse, and it was very restrictive. Maybe let's use that form. And there was a lot of stuff that you were just not allowed to do. So like it was just lots of control. And then you become a parent and you vow, I did not like how that was when I was growing up. I hated how that felt, that I couldn't do anything. And I don't want my child to experience that. And so what ends up happening, you allow your child to do everything. So we go the complete opposite, which is also really bad. That can also create significant challenges and also be very traumatic in the grand scheme of things. And therefore the same principle is at work. You are still operating out of the trauma that you experienced as a child, right? You are operating out of it now from an excess perspective, where because you felt like you didn't get a lot, you didn't get to do a lot, you don't want your child to have that feeling. And so you're very permissive in everything they do. And then you end up having a child who doesn't understand the importance of boundaries, who doesn't understand the importance of self-control and delayed gratification, and all of these really critical life skills that they still need to learn, but to learn within a healthy way. And so that's why the self-awareness that Laurel is speaking about is so critical, because when you can understand that these are the challenges that you may have dealt with growing up, and that they have created certain feelings and fears within you that you are now bringing, that are coming to the fore now because you are a parent. Because all along you probably didn't even realize that these were issues for you because you didn't have a trigger point. There was nothing triggering these things and causing them to bubble up and causing you to now have to be aware of this aspect of your life that you may have never dealt with. And so in addition to, we talked earlier about your community, that tribe, that group of people that you turn to. I also think within that, you need to have some therapy. You need to have a therapist, a counselor, someone that you can go to, that as these things come to the fore, you can go to that person and have an honest conversation and begin the process of working through and unpacking, as we like to say in the therapeutic space, unpacking these things so that you can drill down to the core of what is causing it and how do you resolve it? How do you work through it? How do you overcome it? How do you now be able to be sensitive to when these things are bubbling up, and you can then address them before they become big issues that get out of control. So, I firmly believe in God and therapy, but that's we can have a whole other panel discussion, a conversation around that topic alone. But it's really important.
I think that sounds like a book, Carrie-Ann, God and Therapy, with like a cup of tea.
Maybe coffee. It'll be coffee for me.
There you go, God and Therapy. But I like that we talk about evaluating your trauma and becoming self-aware so that you don't repeat cycles, and then in an effort not to repeat cycle, that you create a new cycle or create a new monster because you've gone to the other extreme. And so the key, I think I'm hearing from you guys, is striking a balance, a healthy reflection of what has happened to me as a child and how that is impacting how I turn up or how I present as a parent to my own child. And then I also, I'm hearing from what you guys have said as well, is that I have to turn up for one child, maybe as a counselor, protector, and a guide, whereas I might just have to turn up for another child in the same family as a listening ear, because that child is self-sufficient. So I'm hearing that as we go through, what would have formed us, now that we are forming our children, we have to really decide what we're taking, what we're stripping, what we're tweaking a bit, and what we're saying, okay, I'm just going to create a new dynamic for each of our children. So Carrie-Ann, I want to come back to you, because I know this was something that you had raised in the prep session about when you parent maybe more than one child, that parenting style is different for each child. And then I want to launch straight into, in parenting children, we've dealt with how we want to turn up. We've dealt with our self-awareness. How do we start imparting in those children new behaviors? And Laurel, I'll come back to you then with that on affirmations and what we speak into our children's lives. So Carrie-Ann, if you could just talk to us a bit about how parenting within the same family can look very different for two children.
Yeah, sure. So, earlier I talked about my daughter having a very strong personality. Here she's telling me she wants pink. So let me just give her that pink one. And having to be able to understand her personality. Actually, my husband and I were having a conversation about that just this morning. And we took her to swimming. And the approach that we had to take with her at swimming, which is to drop her off and drop her off in parentheses, because we don't actually leave. We kind of just go and hide behind the wall and they bush our people. But she thinks that we're gone. But it's really necessary for her right now to have that experience so that she can start to learn, because she's not yet in school. She hasn't started preschool, but she needs to be able to learn that she'll be okay in a space where there's a teacher and there's someone who is there to take care of her, and there's a purpose for you being here. And I was telling my husband, because the beginning, like at the start of dropping her off, it's heart-wrenching when she's crying and she doesn't want to go, and he can't handle it at all. But I'm stronger than him in that respect. So I'm like, she's gonna be fine. It's okay. Let's go. Right. And I said to him, if you have to know your child, because if I didn't think or I didn't know that she had the capability and the capacity to bear up under the discomfort, the temporary discomfort, and to then get to a place where she will settle and she will fully participate and be okay and be fully happy and engaged, then maybe I would have said to the tutor, the swim instructor, you know what, this approach my daughter is not going to work. But I know that she's going to be okay. So the approach works for her. Now, I may have another child that is the complete opposite, and I will know that for her or him is an absolute no. Doing that will not work because their personality, their temperament, the way that, their characteristics, everything about them is completely different and needs to be attended to in a different way. And so that's why, Laurel talked about that attentiveness that you need to have as one of your goals as a parent, getting to know your child, be present and be aware, understand your child, their personality, the nuances of who they are and how they behave. You have to apply that to all your children. And therefore, then you take the various approaches to parenting each child. Yes, you don't want it to be a onerous task where it's almost like the blue book for one child and the pink book for another. But at the same time, you do have to approach them in the uniqueness that they have, because God created them different. Like, just because they came from the two same people doesn't mean they're absolutely the same. And they have their own unique identity. So as a parent, you have to take time to learn your child, to understand what works for each child, and then to apply it accordingly. There's some things that you're going to have to apply across the board, but then there are other things that's like, individual.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from that too is that you don't compare, because one of the things we grew up hearing is, why can't you be more like your sister? Why you can't be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like Miss Springer's daughter,
So true. That's really good. That's so important. I talked about comparing earlier as, parents from one family to the next, but internally, it's really important not to compare either and not to put that weight on your children. Because when you do that, sometimes you can bury them under the weight of comparison of their siblings. You start to snuff out the unique things that are so important and so strong about who they are. And then they start to shape themselves to become something that they're not, because you're comparing them and forcing them to feel less than or not adequate.
Yeah. So Laurel, before we come to you, thank you so much for that, Carrie. And I just want to read what's in the chat, because, as I said, y'all are doing so fantastic that, we asked persons to comment in the chat, and I kind of looked it over. I know you responded to the first question, but for everyone who's on YouTube, so that you are a part of the conversation here with us. In our society, parenting is synonymous with mothering. The goals that Ms. Springer mentioned, are they applicable to fathers as well? And Laurel, you responded, most definitely. Both mothers and fathers need to be able to identify goals so that they can be the best they can be as parents, to which contributor responded, well said. The trauma from scarcity 2 generations ago is reflected in those parents who would give their children everything that child asks for. And, we spoke about the balance between, what you have experienced and how you parent now. Donna says, I love that you referred to having therapy being something that is needed. And I'll add to that, it shouldn't have attached to it a negative stigma. That is so true. Oftentimes when you tell someone I'm going to a therapist, they're like, what's wrong with you? Is something wrong? But it could just mean you need a professional to offload, to unpack, as Carrie Ann said. I love that word as well, unpack. And we're going to come to that a little later on in the conversation about, what we do as a church community to help parents parent, and how we don't just be lay pastors, but we actually get the professional grounding so we can help. Then I believe, from YouTube, yay. Jesus speaks in awe, I think, or that's where the Holy Ghost comes from, and where Jesus died. Jesus had a tribe of people and angels that looked like him. His crown green, not gold. Jesus is being made Okay, so I'm just going to clarify what that person is trying to say, and we will get back to you guys to have you respond to it. But we love that the YouTube community is getting involved as well. So Laurel, coming from what Carrie-Ann has said in terms of, being present for our children, not treating them, by comparison, etc. How do we begin to pour into them so that they become well-balanced, contributing members of society?
I think that I would have mentioned it when we had our prep session, and it's something that I speak about often because, again, it's one of the more practical, personal examples that I can think of in terms of what parents can do to fortify and build up and really send confident children who turn into adults into the society. And that is the phrase that I told you all that my dad said to me and my brother and I, so I'm using proper English, that my father said to my brother and I every single time we would leave home. Remember who and whose you are. And as we often joke, my brother and I, we know that he was saying that as a kind of an undercover, like, you better be careful you there, And because we came from a well-known family and persons would know who we were by association, it was a little bit different or difficult not to be known for who we are away from our parents. So yes, the little threat of that was one thing. But on another note, what he was doing was helping us to really understand who we are as individuals, what our values were, what we believed in, what our principles were, what our moral standpoint was on certain things, as well as whose we belong to, not just biologically, father and mother, but obviously coming from a Christian household, being under the bracket of Christian shaped the way how our behavior was expected. So I think that statement continues to resonate with me because it helped me to really do a deep dive on examining who I was as Laurel. I left Barbados in 2008. And I lived abroad for just over 10 years. And when you go overseas and you're away from your parents and you could do as you please because nobody in there, no one knew me. I was on my own. I was doing my own thing. I had my own place. But even though I had the opportunity to wild out and do whatever, there always was that anchor. There always was that foundation. Because from a young age, I was challenged to think about who I was in this world. Who am I as a student? Who am I as a female? Who am I as a Christian? Who am I at that time as a professional? Who is Laurel? And it is important that parents create the environment for children to be able to figure out who they are. In that process of figuring out, it doesn't mean that your child will do every single thing that you want them to. It doesn't mean that your child may not make mistakes. It doesn't mean that your child may not do things that you may not want them to do, but it is, are you creating an environment where your children are affirmed? Are you creating an environment where your children feel like, I can tell my mom, I can tell my dad something, and even though they may not like what I have to say, I know that I'm coming to a safe space. What are you doing to affirm your child's self-esteem? Because a lot of the challenges that I am seeing within the school system, and I work within the high school system, I am seeing a lot of adolescents who are having a lot of issues, which the root of it is a lack of self-worth. They don't know who they are. They don't get that love and affection and those words of positive affirmation from the spaces that they should be, i.e. the home. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to get it elsewhere. The peer group, the guys on the street, the fellows who say, my sexy friend, you look real good. Or yeah, bro, come through and line with the men tonight, man. So you have to understand the importance of creating the environment for your child to feel every day that they walk through that door that they are loved, they're special, they are important, they are world changers, and they can bring value to this world. And if it doesn't start from at home, chances are you're going to have young persons out there who are just floating through life, trying to figure out what's the next best thing and catching at every word of affirmation that comes elsewhere when that foundation should be laid at home. So it is critical that that starts at home.
So Laurel, I'm coming back to you before I go to Carrie Ann on this. I am broken. I've never had it as a child. How do I begin as a parent to start doing that in my child? Because this is, after all, real talk, right? And I think a lot of times we talk to persons in the church and we put on this nice superficial blessed God. I think is great. You know, we're fantastic. But at home, we're broken.
Shambles.
Don't know how to do it. You want to let out some bad words, you know, because that's what you know. How do I, as a broken parent who've only heard the curse words in the prep session, we were talking about that young man going into Prestige school, but hearing the expletives being exchanged with the parents, but still going, you know, and doing well. How do I, as a broken parent, begin to say, I didn't have it, but I wanna know how, I wanna determine how to do it? Do I just say, I love you? And it sounds bitter coming off my tongue because I've never had it.
Yeah. And that goes back to exactly what Carrie Ann was saying earlier. Therapy, definitely. And that can look differently for different persons. But having that objective, professional person that can help you to work through that. The issue that we face is shame and fear. We are embarrassed to ask for help. And we need to be able to get to a point where we ask ourselves a question. Am I going to allow my fear or my embarrassment that I am a bad parent or I'm not doing everything right or I don't know it all or whatever negative self-talk we allow to dominate our thoughts? Because half of the time we're not as bad as we think we are, but this is the negative self-talk that we are listening to. But we need to be able to ask ourselves, am I going to continue to drown myself in negative self-talk and allow for this cycle to continue? Or am I going to say, it's never too late, let me do something about this and reach out to persons who can help us? Because we can't expect that we can do it alone. We talk about no man being an island. We talk about it takes a village to raise a child. We talked in the beginning about finding your community and persons who can support you along this journey. So it is important that if you feel that you're at this point that, oh my goodness, I've had such a bad experience growing up. I have all of these challenges. I have all of these issues. I don't know any better. The first step is wanting to do better. And once you make a decision that I am going to pledge with everything within me to undo all that was done to me so that I can do better for my child, then your journey begins. And if you have that revelation today, I would encourage you, as soon as this session is finished, identify somebody within your community that you can reach out to, whether it be someone in the church that you trust, that you look up to, and you know that can provide some counsel, or if it is of the more psychological trauma perspective and you really need a trained professional to help you work through, find an organization or talk to your family doctor about, can I get a referral to a psychologist? Can I get a referral to a counselor that can help me to work through these things? Because the longer you stay in your brokenness, the worse it becomes over time. And again, we talked earlier that the harm isn't only to you, but you're actually now harming your child or your children in the process. So it's never too late. I want to give any parent who might be on the call right now and just really feeling really overwhelmed with the prospect of what may be going on in your life, it's not too late and you don't have to do it alone. Reach out, find help, and begin the process. Start with yourself first. And once you build up, we always say in our professional space, you can't pour from an empty cup. Likewise, as a parent, you can't parent if you don't have anything to give. So build yourself up, edify yourself, heal yourself before then you can continue your journey as a parent.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Carrie, and that goes right back to what you would have said in the prep session, right? About nurturing, not necessarily impacting learning. So you could have been in a very negative environment, but still thriving. And so we see adults who are great at their jobs, who are great at sports, etc., but they have no soft skills. And, just failing relationally, but excelling otherwise. And then you would have told us that it's okay to be empathetic towards those persons, but not allow people to continue in bad parenting styles. So just if you could expand on that for us.
Yes. Okay. So you were speaking about the example that was shared in the prep session of this young gentleman, this young boy who was going to school, going to a very prestigious school. And as he was walking in with his mother, I believe it was, they were overheard. I think the mother was speaking to him in a really degrading manner, using some harsh words and cursing and carrying on. And he cursed back too, so it was like that give and take that was going on. But yet, like, he was doing really well at school. Academically, he was on top of his game. He was thriving academically within the school setting. And I was making the point that you might be coming from a very toxic house, a very toxic environment at home, relationally, but that doesn't mean that you're going to then carry that toxicity into every aspect of your life, or that it will manifest, I should put it this way, in every aspect of your life in a negative way. You might actually, in an effort to escape some of the hurt and the pain and the challenges you have at home, you might bury yourself in your work. So therefore you do well because all you're doing is studying and taking in all that information that you're able then to regurgitate. And in our society, the way we do academics is all just to pass the exam largely. So if you can study really well and you know exactly what to take in and it can come right back out, then boom, you can pass your exam and do well. But there are people who are able to compartmentalize life in that way. And they're able to separate what they're experiencing within the relationships from how it impacts their advancement in their careers and in their academics. So it's important for us to understand that can happen. However, Laurel is absolutely correct. What happens now is that we have then this young man who might be really good at what he can do professionally, but maybe so poor when it comes to his relational skill set. That's those soft skills that he needs to maintain good working relationships, to maintain good relationships in general, because he hasn't had the opportunity to experience a positive and a healthy relationship within the home setting. So going into his intimate relationships, he may end up being very argumentative, being very hostile, being very, guarded, not being able to accept compliments, not being able to, like, it impacts in so many ways. And then that's how it bleeds into the professional, because he might be doing well at work. He may get a compliment. He don't know how to take it. It's like, I feel like I waiting for the next ball, the next shoe to drop. You come in with a compliment, but that can come with some kind of backhanded something. So like there's always this suspicion, that could be attached to how he approaches all relationships, especially those who come to him in an unfamiliar way, in a way that he's not accustomed to. And in this instance, that unfamiliar way is actually a positive thing, not a negative thing. And so I think that's one of the challenges we are seeing with our young people now. Some of them just don't know how to be gracious, how to have someone tell them, you're pretty, you're beautiful, you look nice, and they not think, well, okay, what else coming after that? Thank you, but what else? And you were asking the question earlier about how do we fortify our children in their self-esteem and their self-worth. And something that we started with my daughter from very early. And it actually kind of just started by, I was in the mirror getting ready for work one day. I think I was doing my hair and my makeup, and she came and stood in front of me, and she's like, trying to mimic me and stuff like that. And I just broke out into song. I guess this is the artist in me. I just was like, who's that pretty girl in the mirror? Oh my, it's Subira. And now this has become a theme, a little anthem, a little chant that we do all the time. Whenever we pass a mirror, it could be a car window, it could be, we might be outside, and anything that has a reflection and we see ourselves, we just break into song. And so she starts on her own. She would just start singing, oh man, it's Subira. And it may seem insignificant right now. It may seem like, oh, that's just a song. And it may seem like, oh, you're only talking about her outward beauty. But we make sure we follow that up with conversations about her beauty as a person, the inner beauty that exists there, letting her know that she's not just pretty on the outside, she's not just beautiful on the outside, but she has a beautiful heart, she has a beautiful spirit, that she is inherently beautiful because that's how God created her, right? And that she's loved, that she's strong, that she's intelligent, that she can do anything she puts her mind to. We are fortifying her self-worth in every way we can, because she needs to know that she is enough. There are many young people out there, not just girls, boys too, walking around not feeling like they're enough, because we don't tell them that they're enough. We make them feel less than enough. And that's where even the comparison comes back in. That's kind of what I was alluding to earlier too. But we compare, we start to strip away their self-worth and their sense of, strength in who they are, whose they are. Just like how Laurel's father drilled that into them. She was able to walk tall in that because it was something that allowed her to know you are enough. In every space you go into, you do not need to diminish yourself. You do not need to feel less than, because you are enough. And in some instances, you are more than enough. In some spaces you will go into. And so fortifying our children, their self-worth is so important, so that even when they come into experiences where they have abuse coming at them, like that young man, that he would have still been able to rise above that. Yes, still do well academically, but then still be able to work through the hurt that may have been happening in that relationship there with his mother, and still know that despite the way she is communicating with him, it does not define him, and that he is more than that. He's more than those bad words, that she might be spewing at him.
I love it. So, where this takes us, I feel like we've done a complete cycle about how we prepare ourselves, how we prepare for the children, how we speak into their lives, how we become more self-aware. And we hinted on the village, in terms of doing research, but I want to talk about our church village now. And one of the things we said is the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, but sometimes we can no longer trust the village. And we spoke about technology and, YouTube that used to be so innocent. All of a sudden, you have to have like 50 million filters on your technological devices because you may put in teddy bear and the wrong type of teddy appears to an impressionable toddler who's, you're giving advice for education purposes. And so we can't trust the village that is around us. And as Christians, we understand why, it's not just about flesh or, humans, it's about principalities and powers and all of that. And so it becomes even more important to have a church community around you who can support what you're doing as a parent. But again, we go back to the fact that people turn up to church all glamored out and as if everything is perfect. And we can see that it's not. So then how, as a church community, do we begin to encourage parents to understand that, humans have different dimensions. You're not going to get it right each and every time. If you're struggling, the community is here. How do we help parents navigate parenting, understanding that there is no one size fit all, nobody's perfect, we're all imperfect humans trying to do perfect things. And I'll open that question up to both of you. How do we begin as a church community to be the village that parents need?
So for me, I think it reminds me of part of the conversation we were having in the prep session where we were talking about the role of godparents. And I think we have to be so careful in how we choose people to serve in significant roles in our children's lives and in our lives as well as parents. And so for me, when my husband and I were thinking about choosing godparents for our daughter, there was a criteria. They had to be saved, not just Christian by title or religion, but they had to be saved, like honestly, God-fearing people who we knew their heart, we knew exactly what it is, where they stand on key things where God is concerned, and that we knew that would be able to provide that kind of guidance to our daughter, but also to us as parents, that we would be willing and okay with being vulnerable with them, right? That if we weren't doing things right as parents or as individuals, that they can hold us accountable and we will not feel like, wait, am I on business? Because like we're inviting them to be in our business. So when we chose persons, we chose persons that we didn't just want to be able to give my daughter good gifts, like be able to give her really nice Christmas and birthday presents and, money. And no, that is way far down on the list of important things when it comes to the role that they play. We want persons that can assist us with the same things we just talked about, speaking life into her, fortifying her self-worth in the same way that we do, right? That we don't have to be worried about what they will be exposing her to and sharing with her, that we're all on the same page. And so I think the church community, there was the concept of unofficial godparents that came up in the conversation, where the church community can have that role of being unofficial godparents to everyone who is within our church circle, all of the children. But you see, the problem is that we now live in a society where there's so many parents who don't want nobody to talk to the children and don't want nobody to be in their business. Yet they complain when nobody does it. So it's like, what do you really want? Because if you truly want support, it requires a level of vulnerability from you that you have to be prepared to give. Right? That is going to be uncomfortable. That is going to have to strip away your pride. That is going to have to put you in positions where you're going to have to share things that you're going to be embarrassed about, that they're going to make you feel awful talking about out loud. But this is, God says that this is the things we have to do. Remember in the Bible, it talks about confessing to one another. Confession is not just about the sins, but it's also confessing about the things that, the areas where you feel you're falling down, the areas where you're feeling less than, where you're feeling like you aren't doing well in. And having then these people come alongside you and walk with you and uplift you and speak into your life, and through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, give the support that you need to help you be empowered and be the type of parent that you need to be for your family. So to me, that is how the church community comes together. It's not just about preaching on a Sunday morning or when we gather, and have little church luncheons and stuff. But honestly, the real living, the day-to-day living, who are we connected with within our church community that we can honestly say we truly live with? And I don't mean in a in a live with bad way, but who knows us inside and out. And to be fair, it doesn't have to be like everybody. There may be one or two people that God lays on your heart that can be those persons that can walk in accountability with you. But we need those people in our lives.
Excellent. And just to follow on with that, because that was a really good start to that. We talk a lot about creating safe spaces. The home needs to be the primary safe space, obviously. But I would say if we're talking about what the role of the church should be, is one, to create safe spaces where people can speak freely. We allow persons to take the mask off. Because remember, we talked about wanting to appear like you have it all together, and especially for persons who are in leadership. Oh, you gotta appear to have it all together. There can be a crack in the armor because everyone is looking up to me as the pastor or the pastor wife or the pastor's family. And that's another conversation for another day on the pressures that are placed on the pastor's family. But anyways, we want to get into that. But we need to be able to get to a place where we allow people to take off the mask and be vulnerable and develop a community of trust, because there is no safe space if there is no trust. I am not going to come in church and talk about what challenges I am happening at home if by the time church finish and I get to hot up my food, I hear somebody, wait, but you know what Sister Carrie Ann said in church today? Man, she talked about she son, making she can't even sleep at night. Will you want to believe it? She just be on there on the worship team on a Sunday where she had raised up a bit. And she sun down there smoking beer weed. You could believe that? Why would I want to open up if there is no trust? I can keep it real, because I have heard the experience of a lot of persons who have been hurt. We talk about church hurt. It's a real thing. So if we want to support parents, if we want persons to feel safe that they can actually share the challenges that they are experiencing, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to be confidential. We need to be a space where I can be honest and there is no judgment. So that's the first thing that we have to do if we're talking about the role of the church. We also have to have ongoing support. We might provide a lot of support leading up to having the baby. So you do the sessions when you're doing the godparent or the parent or whatever, but are there ongoing supports for parents? So things like what we're doing right now is a great tool, educational opportunity. We're bringing in professions, because that's the other thing that churches need to accept, that yes, we come from a spiritual approach, and the spiritual food that we are sharing is the primary focus of the church. But we also have to understand that God gave us all gifts and give us all talents, and we need to be able to direct resources. So if you know that you can't do it as a pastor or a leader, be honest and say, you know what, this isn't my wheelhouse, but I can redirect you to some resources. I know a psychologist, I know a counselor, I know an organization. Make the appropriate resources. So it means that for you to be able to refer, you have to be knowledgeable about what exists. So churches can have things like parent support groups. Don't just focus on the Sunday school and the recitation and the harvest and the Christmas program and the VBS and all of that. But what are you doing for the parents? And if I were to give a final few pointers, be humble. And we talk about the role of the older and younger coming together. So what is the role of the older men in the church, the role of the older women in the church? And they also need to take a position of humility, because another complaint that I hear is that them get on as if they was always perfect, then get on as if they was always in the church. So be humble and understand that, yes, back in the good old days, you would have done things this way, or this is what would have worked. But understand that generations change, principles remain the same, values remain the same, but the way we do things may have to look a bit different. So come from a position of humility, find common ground. So yes, you might be 70, and yes, I might be 27, but where can we find things that we can find in common? How can we build from our differences? So yes, you might be different in one way and I might be different in the next. But again, is there some common ground that we can establish? And finally, I would encourage events that allow for cross-generational interaction. Because a lot of time we have the youth groups doing their thing. We got the women doing their thing. We got the men doing their thing. We got the mothers doing their thing. What about having events where everybody come together, where they can be that cross-pollination? And I hear from you, and you hear from me, and the older hear from the younger, and the younger hear from the older. So the church plays a critical role in supporting parents at every step of the journey. And I would encourage churches not to feel overwhelmed or I can't do this because we don't know it all. You don't have to know it all, but you just need to know what your strengths are. And then if there are things that need to be fortified elsewhere, you can reach out to other resources. And I pause.
I'm gonna say I'm writing, right? And I love that. Fortify elsewhere. I find oftentimes as the church body, we think that our church is just confined to those four walls. But if my church does deliverance well, and your church does counseling well, and another church does intercession well, we are one church body, right? Ding, 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 ding. But the Carrie they're like mind blowing. So I love what you guys have offered this evening. Would you believe it's already 8:55?
Wow.
So I know I can't even do the roundup. I have like 5 pages of notes now. And so I'm like, okay. So in the last 5 minutes, I would like to ask, let's bring it full circle again, back to parents and child. How would you suggest to parents in 5 minutes that they bond with their kids at whatever stage? Like, what does that look like? So maybe one of you can take from toddler to adolescence, and then another one could take teenager to adults. I've found that when I went to university at 18, you know, I like you, Laurel, it's like you have this whole idea of, yes, I've arrived, but then I'm calling home asking, how do you cook pilau? How do you do this? And they're like, wait, hold on, you're not at university. Why are you calling us? You know? So how do you bond with your parents at different stages, or with how do parents bond with their children at different stages? And then if you could give us a roundup of this evening's conversation, Carrie Ann.
Yeah, let Carrie Ann start. No, let Carrie Ann start off the
I guess
baton
because
she can
I have
speak
to
for the
talk
young. Yes, yes. Perfect.
Oh, I'm living it right now. Well, you have to be where they're at. So you know, I have to tap into my inner child to support my daughter. Right now when she wants to play, she wants to play hand games, and she wants to play, you know, what's one of her favorite games right now? Oh, the one where you pass a cake. I forget it. It's not coming to me right now. So, and this can be at any given time. So I have to kind of just be ready to engage with her, to keep her engaged, and to not always shush her up or push her aside. Because there are times where she wants to play and stuff that, you know, I am not in a position to engage her fully. And so sometimes it has to be like, okay, baby, I'm gonna just give you 2 seconds and we just do a quick, hand thing. And I say, okay, no, mommy has to go back and finish this. And poor child, sometimes it's not enough, it's not, but sometimes it's enough to just satisfy her for that moment. And she goes on happily and does whatever, and it allows me to continue on with what I do. So like you have to know where your child is at and be able to meet them where they're at. You cannot expect your child to come up to your level, right? It's unfair to expect her to raise the level of a parent. Like the other day she needed to do something and she was with me and my mom and we were doing something else. So we were telling her to wait. And when I caught myself, it was like, oh my goodness, we've been asking this child to wait for so long. Like for an adult, it's really not a very long time. We were asking her to wait, but for a child her age, she's only 2. It was like forever. So then I had to go to her and apologize and say, I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting so long. But then affirm her. You're doing such a good job at waiting. Oh my goodness, yay. And really show her like you have the capacity, like it's not beyond you. So know where your child is at and be willing to come to their level, especially when they're much younger, and extend a lot of grace. A lot of grace. A lot of grace. And make sure you take care of yourself. That's where the self-care comes in, because Laurel spoke about not pouring from an empty cup. I need to make sure that I'm filling up myself with all the emotional stuff that I need so that I can carve out those few seconds. And this is just few seconds of pouring into her, right? But if I don't have it, I can't even fathom the thought of carving out the time to pour into her because I feel depleted. So it's really important to pay attention to your self-care and to take care of yourself so that you can be all you need to be for your children, where they're at.
Well, I think that will carry on. That same concept is applicable even throughout all of the developmental stages. But if I guess I could speak a little bit to the adolescent period, since that is my kind of wheelhouse, I would say that we all know adolescent period, all of the hormones, all of the changes, all of the attitudes. Sometimes some parents actually feel as if their child don't even like them anymore at that stage. So it can be a real struggle. And I know that a lot of parents that I talk to actually feel like they're not doing a good job. A lot of them don't feel as if they're good enough. They feel as if the greatest thing that I hear is that they don't feel connected to their kids. And I also hear a lot of kids say that they don't feel connected to their parents. So that brings me back to one of the things that I said in my original submission in terms of what the goals of every parent should be. And if there is a time that you need to be present and available, it continues to be in adolescence. Be intentional about the time that you spend with your adolescent child. And yes, you may not understand all of the things that they are interested in. You might not know much about football. You might not know much about some video game that they may like. You might not know much about fashion. You might not know much about what music that they're listening to, but you need to take the time to show a genuine interest in something that they are passionate about, because that's your connector. And be intentional in terms of being present when you are with your child. Don't be on the phone. Don't be checking emails. Don't be watching TV, but actually be present, because at that stage, teenagers have questions. They went through the day, they've interacted with a whole bunch of people. Some experiences were great, some were not so great. Bullying is a serious thing that is happening a lot, and some children don't know how to talk about it. But you would find that if you start off doing what Carrie Ann talked about in terms of having space and time for your child, that actually works out to be for your benefit when they become teenagers, because you've already set the template and the comfort for conversations, so that by the time you go and you pick up your daughter at school and she gets in the car, or your son gets in the car, you don't have to pick his teeth to ask, how was your day? Good. What you do? I just do work. You got homework? Yeah. One word answers. But because you've already developed that connection and that space where they know that they can talk to mommy or daddy, as soon as they open the car door, you won't believe what happened at school today. And it all comes out. Just listen. You don't even have to probe. You can find out everything. You know what you can find out on those drives. You can hear who their friends are. You're going to hear what's happening at school. You're going to hear about the dynamics of what's happening in other people's household. So it is really important to listen and create opportunities. And I am always about being efficient with time. You may not have 2 hours to spend with your child. Let's be honest, you come home after work, you're tired, you got a lot of things to do, but take the moments where you can get it. So if it's on the drive home, if it's let's prepare dinner together, if it is, okay, we like, I don't know what's the new shows today, but we like Game of Thrones. So that's our show and we watch Game of Thrones together. But find things that you can connect with your child, you can bond with your child, you can communicate with your child, because once you establish those common points, when it comes to the deeper things about what mental health issues they might be having, you know, they're feeling a little bit off, but they don't know what's happening. They might be feeling a little bit depressed. They're going through a really tough time and they don't know how to articulate it. If you create the environment to talk about the daily easy things, you create space for them to feel comfortable to talk about the deeper, more vulnerable things. So give space, give time, be intentional, and be present.
Yeah, I want to quickly add to that, because the thing that I really want to drive home from what Laurel just mentioned too is about the importance of it being a genuine, intentional act.
Yes,
Not be
very much
intentional
so.
because you just want to like know information to
Correct.
use, you know, to lord over your
Mhm.
child with or anything, but genuinely caring about
Correct.
them, wanting to know about them and who they are, what's happening with them and around them.
Yes.
And when you do that, they will be so willing to come to you because you are a safe space for them.
Yes.
They'll be willing to share information and to ask questions and to come to you when they're sad, when they're happy, when they're indifferent. It doesn't matter. They'll want you to know. You will become that point of reference for them, as that person that they can always go to, who will always judge them, but sometimes even in the judgment, they'll know the judgment is coming from a healthy place. It's not one where you're just trying to lord over them as a parent. So you've got to be genuine about it. They'll see through it if it's not a genuine, intentional act.
Correct. I really want to emphasize that, because a lot of comments that you hear is, you know, children say they know their parents ask questions, but they know that they don't really care, or they have an ulterior motive. They're just kind of doing it for a checkbox. You don't want to do it as a checkbox activity. You want to be sure that you are genuine, and you have to also know your child. Again, it's about different children having different perspectives or take things differently. So that can be a challenge if you have multiple children. But one of the things that I do when I talk to parents who are trying to connect with their child, I said, okay, you need to have mommy daughter time, or you need to have daddy son time. Even if you may have 2 kids, find something that one likes. And if one of them like planes, you find yourself at the airplane club or carry them up to the airport or something, and do something that is just you and them that you can bond. And then for the other child, they may like, I don't know, going to the beach. So you can do that with them. And then you do things with both of them or the multiples together. So it's important that you do things like that, because it also helps children not to feel invisible or they're just a part of a big group. And sometimes that one-on-one time is important. So yes, do things as a family. Yes, spend time having dinner together, lunch together, your meals together, but also find time to plug into your children individually. That makes them feel special. They get ready. They know, I'm going out with mommy, I'm going out with daddy. And that can also happen as a teenager, even more so, being intentional about that one-on-one connection time.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I think the best way that we can end this before we hand over to Pastor Henry is one of the ways Pastor Francis explained it to us. He said that as parents, we cannot pick up spilled milk, but we can save what is left in the container. So now that we know better, let's aim to do better.
I was going to comment on that. I have it written down right here. I was going to share it as one of part of my final words.
I got it.
That is so good. I found myself repeating it, throughout the week to other people, because it really resonated in so many ways. Like at the end of the day, there are things that we may have messed up on, in the past. Don't make sense dwelling there. We can't go back there. But now that we know better, now that we have information that we can make better decisions and informed decisions, we now have a responsibility to do better. And I think we all can. We can definitely do better.
Yeah, ladies, I want to thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight and learned a lot. And there was so much that resonated. And I think we got real in the conversation, especially as a church community, and what we can do to support parents. And that is what we want to do with this program, right? We don't want to just be saying, bless God, pray about it, but we want to give tangible examples about what people can do as they walk this life out and in preparation for the next life. So to those of you online in Zoom and on YouTube, in 2 weeks, we see you for the parents of the 21st century. That's our next topic. We want to thank Laurel Springer and Carrie Ann Hurley for joining us tonight. I'm going to hand over to Pastor Henry for final comments. Good evening. I am Sasha Sutherland.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sutherland, Sister Springer and Sister Hurley. Thank you very much. As Dr. Sutherland said, we are going to talk about our next program is on the parents of the 21st century. Where did we go wrong? And it's going to be very interesting. As a matter of fact, it came to me that the idea came from an article that I saw some time ago from the Wall Street Journal. The excerpt from it says, violence among children has soared across the country since 2020, a stark reversal of the decades-long decline in juvenile crime. In the US, homicides committed by juveniles acting alone rose by 30% in 2020 from a year earlier, while those committed by multiple juveniles increased by 66%. And I think in the Caribbean, we are seeing something similar. And so we will be talking on our next program 2 weeks from now. Where did we as parents go wrong during this century, this 21st century? And so join us then. It's really been a pleasure. I'm not sure, Dr. Sutherland, what is happening with our audience this evening. I'm not sure if Palm Sunday had anything to do with it. I'm not sure if they switched today, Saturday, but we will try to find out, but we are going to plan to be back here in 2 weeks' time. And thank you everyone for listening. And thank you again, panelists, and do have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Lord bless you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sister Hurley,
yes, please.
Tell me something.
Pastor Henry, end the live broadcast.
Oh, yes, thanks. Stop. Did I stop it?
No, it's still going.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, that's not.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Pastor. Bye, Sasha.
Bye, Brother Georgie.
Hurley.
Good evening. Very good program.
Yes.
I'm not.
Tell me something.
It still says live in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's saying live, but you're not giving me the option to stop. Okay, I know what I'll
Did
do
I
just now.
stop it?
No, it's still going.
Have a good evening,
Okay, that's not working.
Bye, Pastor. Bye, Sasha.
Hi, Brother Georgie.
Okay, Brother Georgie.
Very good program.
I'm not. Tell me something.
It still says live in the
Still
corner.
says
Yeah,